oil guy, small businessman in your sector. This is personal to our family. So we take it very seriously as to what your success looks like, because that is his success. In 16 months, folks, I've put 80,000 miles on 3 cars now getting around the state of Colorado. 80,000 miles in 16 months. I've been to Craig 4 times, Cortez 4 times, Grand Junction 8 times, Rifle 6 times. I've been to the Eastern Plains. And I'm from rural America myself. Rural America and rural Colorado, those cities and towns need those jobs. They need your industry jobs. Those $65,000 a year jobs mean a lot in Craig, mean a lot in Cortez. By golly, I think they mean quite a bit right here in Denver, too. So my goal is to strengthen your industry as much as possible and do it through the regulatory environment. I know some companies have embraced the regulations, and you're doing fine with the regulations, but maybe not all. So let's readdress these regulations and send a clear message that you are welcome and we are eager to have you develop business in this state. And we must have a predictable permitting process and a very expeditious permitting process. I want the rest of the country to look at Colorado and say, how do you get this done so efficiently? How do you get it done so fast and fairly and balanced? I think all 3 of us are going to tell you most everything you need to hear today. This is also about your governor. This is also about your freedom. It is about our Constitution. It is about standing up as a state and standing up to Washington and standing up to overregulation and saying we're going to start doing what's best for the state of Colorado before what you worry about in Washington, D.C. We have to exercise our state's rights and do what's best for our state. And again, in our state, the economy equals energy, and that's the kind of champion you will have if you give me the opportunity to be your next governor. I'm not sure where I'm at time-wise, but that's all I need. If you give me $100, I'll spend 90, put 10 back in your pocket. If you give me time, I'll put some extra time back in your pocket as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Right here, sir. A little more comfortable here.
Yeah.
These are more comfortable chairs than the chairs at the station. So you talked about the regulations, and you said it's time to readdress those. Let me ask a little more specifically, what do you mean by that?
Well, the first thing that I experienced when I decided to take a look at a run for governor is I mentioned I was going to do this, and this family member of mine said, meet me down at Marlowe's, and I want to talk to you about the new regulations. And he walked me through the general overview, the umbrella of these regulations, and how certain departments of government were invited into the process, that maybe we should reconsider their involvement in that process. We should look at maybe the politically correct diversity on the COGCC and perhaps return it more to a technical board rather than one that represents all these warm, fuzzy organizations that may or may not fit in the big picture here. So that's what it means to me, is regulations that have obviously impeded a lot of people in this business, and digging into them page by page, sitting down with industry experts and saying what needs to go. I'm sure there's some good things in these regulations. I haven't read them word for word, but we need to get out the things that are hindering your industry and find that balance. And as a conservative, I can tell you, I want that tax revenue in this state, and I'm going to probably lean a little bit further to the right than some others.
Let's talk about the board. You mentioned the makeup of the board. It's certainly a topic that folks here in the audience are very interested in. Do you not like the composition as it's currently set up? Do you think it needs to be tweaked somehow, maybe done a little differently?
I do think. I think the members of the board were put there with good intent and good faith, but I don't agree with the backgrounds of everybody. I think we need to be more technical and more industry focused, and that would be my goal.
If you end up changing the board, though, and looking at the rules and regulations, how do you ensure the stability that you also talked about for this industry?
Well, it's a delicate balance that we're all going to strive for and set certain goals and say these are the goals I have for the board. Those goals will be based on input from people within your industry and other people in the areas around your industry. And I'm ultimately going to say, how do we get as much energy out of our state as possible and do it responsibly? And that's an executive's discretion. You know, we don't sit around and legislate all day, folks. The governor, one of the primary goals is appointing commission heads and commission members and department heads, and that's the responsibility and the privilege we have as an executive to pick the right people to help us achieve the goals and the balance that we need.
You talked about taxes. What is your position regarding severance taxes right now in the state? Are they too high, too low?
You know, I haven't heard that from the audience, and I'd love to hear that over the next several months. I haven't heard anyone complaining one way or the other. And I think what we need to do with severance taxes is design them in a way to bring business back to our state. With 25 years of business development experience, you have to get out there and you have to get to know your customers, you have to know their needs, you have to know where their mindset is, and then you have to work with the financial incentives and guidelines that you have to we got to make the deal happen. It's about making the deal happen, and we've got to bring this business back to our state from other states, and I'd be glad to do that.
What are your thoughts on severance tax dollars staying in the community in which the development's occurring?
I like the idea of severance tax revenue going into the local communities. I like the way it flows right now. But again, if there's other ideas out there that you have and the majority of people feel that way, then I would be glad to explore that. But right now, it seems to be working just fine the way it is. The sad thing is some of that severance tax revenue isn't. I think it's not getting to where it used to go because we're unable to balance our state budget, and they're going after funds wherever they can. You need a governor who understands how to bring top-end revenue in. Smaller state government to reduce our tax burden and to reduce costs, stronger severance tax revenue, stronger small business revenue, and then we don't have to worry about cutting things everywhere.
You talked about budget cuts. What role do you see this industry playing in kind of bringing the state back economically?
I have been saying the same thing on the campaign trail for well over a year, folks. Number one, downsize state government. Number two, strengthen our energy industry. Your industry is the path to our state's recovery. Your industry is the path to getting unemployment down to 4 or 5% instead of 8%. I see folks here that do business in North Dakota. North Dakota's current governor never held office before he became the governor of North Dakota. He came from the business world, and now they have 2% unemployment, folks. That's what you need in your next governor.
What's the difference? I mean, what, from a leadership perspective, what's been done, and what would you bring that's different from a business side of things?
Well, I think from the past 4 years, we've had a very fine man as our governor, but he didn't come in with the skill set that I think is required right now. We had a unique time in our state's history, in our country's history, and I hope that you will look for a governor that starts first on constitutional government. Folks, if you lose your freedom, your businesses won't matter. And if the government keeps getting deeper into your pockets and over-regulates you and over-taxes you, your businesses will not make a difference. So we need to start with the constitutional foundation of what our state should look like. Then we build into business and into the energy industry.
You mentioned the current governor. He has certainly put an emphasis on the renewable energy sector. And how do you balance kind of competing energy interests, if you will, this sector with the renewable sector, while at the same time kind of trying to encourage both, I would imagine? Or do they both need to be encouraged?
Well, we were having some spirited conversation about coal and gas over lunch just a few minutes ago. Let's get back again to constitutional government. And our Constitution starts with free markets. And free markets and a competitive capitalist market is what I want to see. Folks, it's very easy for us to stand up here and say, I'm going to do everything for the natural gas industry and make you the richest people in the world and vote for me. I want free markets. I want competitive markets. And if natural gas is the right product, then your industry will prove that to the voters and the consumers out there, and you will rise to the top because you've done so through a competitive free market environment. That's the kind of environment I want to produce as your governor.
And yet you saw in the legislature this past year, I imagine part of the spirited conversation that you had at the table was the legislature passing a bill, the governor signing it into law, that did take a stand on this issue, transforming coal plants into natural gas plants. If you can, kind of expound a little bit on your thoughts about that legislation.
We didn't actually hit the legislation over lunch, but I don't think the government belongs picking favorites in any industries. And this was dressed up as green jobs, green energy, but I think if you play in the inside political world, it was more than that. And I want to see a strong natural gas industry. I want other governors calling me saying, how did you get your natural gas production up so high in Colorado? But I don't feel it's the government's job to play favorites in one industry over another. Prove to the consumers that you've got the best product and you will rise to the top.
Do you sense that the current governor has played favorites in the renewable sector as opposed to this sector here?
Oh, well, there's no doubt in my personal opinion that the governor played favorites. He has an agenda. And you know, most politicians have agendas, and they come in with it, and they're going to drive that agenda no matter whether you want it or not. They're going to drive an agenda, and that's what Governor Ritter did. And he forsook the traditional energy industry to make political points in Colorado and more so in Washington, and shame on him for doing that.
Do you feel that, what is the role then that sector plays in this state's future?
I think new energy has its place if it can compete. It has to compete on a level playing field, and some folks might say, well, that's a little naive, Dan. Everybody gets subsidies here and there, gets a little favoritism from the government. Well, you shouldn't. You shouldn't get favoritism from the government. Your industry should prove itself. I've been to Baca County. Anyone here from Baca County? They're pretty proud of their wind out there. When someone told me, Mr. Mays, we got really good wind out here in Baca County, I said, I beg your pardon? And he goes, we have consistent, steady wind out here. And they want those wind turbines out there. They want the jobs in rural Colorado. And my opinion is if they can build them and they can stand on their own and we don't have to subsidize them, then let them compete in the free market. But if they can't, then don't.
Each of the candidates was given a yes or no question for the final question. Mr. Mays, do you believe that hydraulic fracturing should continue to be regulated as it currently is at the state level?
I agree, yes.
Ladies and gentlemen, Dan Mays. Thank you very much, sir. Thanks. Whoops. Our next candidate is going to be former congressman from the 3rd Congressional District, Republican Scott McInnes, who's just getting the microphone on right now. Smarter than me, didn't want